We're in the middle of COVID and we're talking about immune function, and sleep directly impacts immune function.
Hey, what's shaking? Welcome back to All In. I'm your host, Rick Jordan, and today I'm pumped for you because I have Dr. Michael Breus, a clinical psychologist. His expertise is in the sleep of science, or the science of sleep, and peak performance with over 22 years, over 2 decades of experience. He's the author of The Power of When and Good Night, the Sleep Doctor's 4-week program for better sleep and better health. And he's also on the clinical advisory board for the Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Michael Breus, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you because this is a big topic for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of high performers in general. And I know I've had my own personal struggles at times too, when I've gone through some anxiety and depression because of some physical illness, and sleep was just probably the thing that sent me down into that, or lack of, rather deeper down into that spiral of death, that spiral of mental death.
Well, it's hard because sleep is this mysterious thing and nobody really knows and understands it except for people like me who've spent their career studying it. And it's this thing that we're supposed to be experts at, right? Like we're all supposed to know exactly how to sleep in every single situation. And of course, that's not the case. And so our bodies react. And unfortunately, especially during times like now in the middle of COVID, we're seeing tremendous changes across people's sleep habits. And it's affecting everything from their energy levels to their business decisions, quite honestly. I mean, let's be fair here. If you're sleep deprived, you're probably not making the best decisions out there. There's actually a study looking at entrepreneurship and sleep deprivation. And what they discovered is they took entrepreneurs and they had them sleep very well. And then they presented ideas to them. And then they had the same entrepreneurs stay up all night and present similar ideas to them. And what happened was during the sleep deprived situation, the entrepreneurs didn't see the opportunity. Like all they could see was the negative side of it. They couldn't see because there was an opportunity in there. Like it wasn't a great situation, but there was an opportunity in there to flip it around and change it, as many entrepreneurs, try to stay positive. And they couldn't do that when sleep deprived, right? And so that's like a superpower that all entrepreneurs have, is their motivation, right? Is their diehard need to have that product or service come to the public and help people with whatever it is that solution is. And when you're tired, it's hard to muster that up.
It is. Yeah, you're right on. And I remember being in those sleep deprived states too. And I still hold the opinion that I don't like sleep, but I keep it on there just because of being a high performer. I just would prefer to have more hours.
Yeah. You're like my friend, Tom Bilyeu. If you know Tom, he does big podcast, big performance guy. And he turned to me in the middle of our podcast together. And he was like, Michael, I hate sleep. And I was like, dude, I don't think that's a good idea. Right. And he was like, I hate wasting the time that it's required for sleep, was what he meant. And I said, well, let's just break that down for just a half a second here. So if you want to perform, I can show you data in any area, any organ system, any disease state, any physical activity. I can show you data where sleep improves performance. Any cognitive activity, anyone, I can show you where sleep improves performance. Any reaction time task, anyone, I can show you where sleep improves performance, right? So every single thing that all of us want to do, which is perform, succeed, drive, do better, all of those kind of things, every single one of them is affected directly by your sleep.
That's not surprising. And when you talk about Tom, he and I, we've just spoken here and there. We're not good friends or anything, but just, distance acquaintances, right? But when we've spoken, I get the feeling, because it's impact theory, right? And I get the feeling that we're like, or similar minded in that way, to where, yeah, it's not that I really hate sleep itself. It's that's it. I just hate the amount of time that it seems to waste or take up in the day. But then I take a look at, because this morning I worked out. I did a 45-minute row this morning, and then I alternate that with lifting, and I dedicate the time to that. But I still, even with that, I hate the amount of time that I have to spend doing that. And usually I'll try to double it up by listening to an audiobook or something like that while I'm in the middle of workout. I can't do that with sleep, man. I can't double up.
Well, you could, but it probably wouldn't work very well. There was actually some studies where people played audio during sleep to try to learn faster and better. It doesn't work particularly well. The thing about exercise versus sleep, right? Because a lot of people equate the two. They're like, well, I train, I sleep, that kind of thing. Here's the thing is you can do a certain amount of physical activity that does not require full cognition, right? You can be on a treadmill, right? And if you're going and you set your pace, your body kind of knows what to do. And then your mind can kind of wander. You can listen to a podcast. You can learn something, things of that nature. During the sleep process, your brain is equally as active as your body. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think when you go to sleep, you kind of put the car in park. Nothing could be further from the truth, dude.
Let's dive into this, man. Yeah, I love this.
So what happens is like, so first of all, when you enter let's back up for just a second. The process of sleep occurs based on two systems in the brain. One is called your sleep drive. The other is called your sleep rhythm. Okay. So these are two very separate systems. Drive is, it's a lot like hunger, right? So I'm hungry. I eat something and that hunger begins to dissipate. The same holds true with sleep. So when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through the system, makes it to a very specific receptor site in your brain and accumulates. As you get more adenosine, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. That's only one part of the process. Now, to be fair, dude, I'm kind of a geek. And so I was looking at the molecular structure of adenosine. And I noticed that the molecular structure of adenosine and the molecular structure of caffeine are off by one molecule.
Really?
Just one. Yeah. Which is kind of amazing when you think about it, right?
I'm tracking with you because if you don't mind me just stopping you in the middle, because I want to continue this process to the end to explain this whole thing. But you said specifically it's glucose, right? That a cell absorbs and then spits adenosine out the end.
Correct.
Interesting. So not protein, not amino acids, but glucose specifically.
Right? And that's what our brain is looking for to eat, right? And so when it works its way, it ends up in this spot. Here's the thing that's interesting about caffeine and adenosine is you can actually substitute caffeine in for adenosine in this receptor site. And I'll show you how in just a second. The second one is rhythm, right? Or circadian rhythm. Also a lot like hunger. You get hungry around breakfast time, around lunchtime, and around dinner time. Same holds true with sleep. Most people, at least here in North America, get sleepy somewhere between 10 and 11 o'clock at night on average. Right now, to be fair, there are some night owls like me. There's some early birds who like to go to bed early. And then there are people who do all kinds of different things. So in my third book, I wrote all about these things called chronotypes. So people might not have heard of a chronotype before, but you've actually heard of the concept. So if you've ever heard of somebody being called an early bird or a night owl, those are chronotypes. So I actually developed 4 chronotypes as opposed to 2. We'll talk about that in a second. But what's interesting here is if you have your circadian rhythm in sync and your sleep drive is high, you sleep. But if either one of them is off, that's when you have a problem. So you've got 2 ways to go down this path of problem. You either have a sleep disorder, apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movements. Believe it or not, there are 88 different sleep disorders out there. Honestly, I had no idea you could fuck up your sleep 88 different ways, to be fair, right? Okay. The second path is what I call disordered sleep. Okay. So not an official sleep disorder, not apnea, not narcolepsy, but they go to that room in the back of the house and they're there for 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, and they come back and they're unrefreshed. They're like, that sucked. I want more. I want better, higher quality. That's the area that I've been spending my time on for the last 5 years to really delve deep in there. To be fair, there are 5,000 or 6,000 sleep specialists out there, and they do an awesome job treating narcolepsy and apnea, and because that's what they do. They do it every single day, and I did that for 8 years.
The actual sleep disorders, not the disordered sleep, but the sleep disorders.
Correct. Yeah. For almost 10 years, I saw patients in Atlanta, and every day, 30 patients a day, 10 sleep studies a night, really hardcore sleep medicine. But when I moved to Arizona, I started to get a little bit more interested in a more holistic approach, not just a 100% medical approach, because honestly, I had a lot of people who would show up at the sleep clinic and they didn't have apnea, but they felt like crap. They didn't have narcolepsy, but they told me they were sleepy all day. And so it was kind of an interesting challenge to see what could I do from a nutrition standpoint, from a movement standpoint, from a genetic standpoint, like what could I do that could help me understand more about why these people were feeling so terrible. So then I started to understand more about the sleep cycles, right? And so it turns out that if you go from wake, you go to stage 1, stage 2, then down into stage 3, 4, back to stage 2, and into REM sleep. That little kind of dance maneuver is called a sleep cycle, and it's roughly 90 minutes long. Most people have 5 of these sleep cycles. So log into your brain. 90 minutes is how long a sleep cycle is, and we have roughly 5 of these cycles. Okay, so that's it for the biology lesson for today. Other than I'm going to tell you what these stages of sleep do.
Yeah.
So
quick
stage
math for everyone listening. That's 7.5 hours, which is an
correct.
Average amount of sleep, right? That you maybe should have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in doing the math, what did we just discover? 8 hours is a myth. The math doesn't even work, right? Like you just noticed it, right? The math doesn't work. So number one,
there was an article just the other day with Jeff Bezos saying, I always get 8 hours of sleep every night. This was just 3 days ago that I saw. Yeah.
And so there are people who have locked and loaded in their head that that's what they need to do. I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. So I'm a high performance sleep coach now. So I take people exactly like you, CEOs who are about to go public, who are having a hard time sleeping the night before, and I teach them how to get 8 hours of sleep inside of 6.5 hours. What did you just say, Michael? Yes, that's exactly what I said. Is I teach people how to do this. It has to do with the consolidation of the sleep cycle. So when we're looking at these different cycles, we need to know what each stage does. So back to the stages. Stage 1 is merely a transition. It only makes up about 3 to 4% of sleep. So it's really just to get you inside of the unconscious state. Stage 2 does the most in terms of time, unfortunately, the least in terms of process. So stage 2, I think of it a lot like a buffer, although there's a lot of things that happen in there that are important. Setting up for things like memory consolidation, setting up for things like physical consolidation, all important stuff. But to be fair, you don't really need as much stage 2 as you get. Stage 3, however, is beauty sleep. It is the physical restoration. It is the wake up and feel awesome sleep. It's where growth hormone is emitted. And so the largest bolus of growth hormone is emitted there. Just as a quick side note, when we talk about growth hormone, that's also what produces our killer T cells. So as a quick note, we're in the middle of COVID and we're talking about immune function, and sleep directly impacts immune function. No two ways about it. You
took one of my questions off the board for you, because that was exactly what's the direct correlation between sleep and immune function, especially because of the pandemic right now.
So it's killer T cell production during stages 3, 4 sleep. So you don't want to do anything that disrupts stage 3, 4 sleep. We're going to talk about 2 things that disrupt stage 3, 4 sleep quite a bit, and that's alcohol and caffeine. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you to get rid of them. I like scotch and I like my Black Rifle coffee. So don't worry.
Brother. Both of those. Yes. A little AK-47, right?
I'm a JB. I'm a Just Black
you
guy.
Are. All right.
But I love their stuff, right? But again, thinking through this as an idea, and what are we talking about here? Like, we want to be careful with stage 3, 4 sleep, because that's that physical restoration. REM sleep is our mental restoration, right? So this is where we move information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. We create an organizational substructure in our head for information. So it's kind of like this data is coming in through our eyes and our nose and our ears and our mouth. And, what does our brain do with it, right? So it's electric. And so what it does is it has to find kind of the right filing cabinet, the right file drawer, and the right file to kind of deposit the information to then be able to retrieve it later on in case you needed to answer a question or recognize a person or ride a bicycle or what have you, right? So what happens is that there's thousands of pieces of information wandering through your eyes and ears and nose, and it doesn't always get it right. So the bizarre nature of our dreams is this encoding process, we think, right? So if you had a dream where you walked downstairs and your dog was eating a bowl of spaghetti with your second grade teacher, right? What probably happened is you probably had Italian for dinner that was really good. So you're thinking, I want to go back to that restaurant. Your dog jumped on your bed and pissed you off. So that's how he ended up in your dream. And the second grade teacher is because your kids are in second grade and they were talking about second grade and reminded you of your teacher, and boom, all of that information got combined in this weird dream that you're having. So once you start to understand the stages of sleep, the cycles of sleep, and what each one of these processes do, then quite honestly, you can manipulate the crap out of them. in a healthy way. So in my third book, I wrote about called The Power of When. We talked about this idea of chronotypes, which is sort of the idea I introduced a few moments ago. Remember, early bird or night owl. It turns out there aren't just two, there's four, right? So in the 70s, somebody came up with this quiz called the morningness, eveningness quiz. And what they discovered is that people started healed better at certain times during the day, and other people healed better during other times during the day. And they were like, what the heck is going on here? So they started to understand this, but it was only at the extremes, only at the early bird side, only at the night owl side. Then about in the 90s, somebody said, there's got to be people in the middle. Let's call those people hummingbirds. Okay. Now, to be fair, I wasn't really big on the whole bird vernacular going on. Like,
how did that end up coming about? Why?
I think really what happened is that the original guys in the 70s, early birds and night owls made sense because they used lark and owl as these representatives because they were thinking early in the morning, owls late at night. But what they didn't come into it was there's actually several other types of humans out there. And so my contribution to the literature is I came up with the fourth chronotype. In the 80s, they came up with the hummingbird. But what I said to myself is, I got a lot of patients who have insomnia, but you know what? They have a weird kind of insomnia. And it almost feels like if they could just sleep at different times during the day, they would be just fine. Just like if you were an early bird and you slept at certain times during the day, or if you were a night owl and you slept at certain times during the day. So I went in and I started really digging around, and lo and behold, I discovered a genetic variant very similar to the genetic variants for early bird and night owl. So if you go to the PER3 gene, I know I'm getting a little technical here, but if you go to the PER3 gene, you're looking for something called a SNP, which is a single nucleotide polymorphism. That's basically a way of saying that the DNA blocks flip-flopped by mistake in one particular area. When it does that in one particular area, it sends a signal and tells our body to create different proteins, which then causes different activities. So in this PER3 gene, if it's a little bit longer, you're going to stay in bed a little bit longer. You're going to have a little bit longer sleep drive, and you're going to want to stay in bed later. If it's a little bit shorter, it does the opposite. Well, that's kind of interesting, right? So then I started looking around in these genes, and I was like, there's an insomnia gene that does that, but it does it in a weird way. It does it where it gives you these bursts of sleep. So you have these short sleep drive, but you have multiple ones. Well, it drives people freaking crazy to do something like that. But once I was able to identify it and teach them what they were, everything got a lot simpler. Then something really weird happened. So we're working on this book and we're thinking we're going to help people sleep, right? And then all of a sudden people would wake up and they would say, well, I found these time zones. I'm like, what do you mean time zones? They're like, well, I found these times of day where I do things better than others. You probably have experienced this yourself. I don't know about you, but like there's certain times of day that I write better. There are certain times of day that I run better. There's certain times of day that I think better. So I started to wonder, could this be related to these ideas of chronotypes, right? Because I know people who get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? I friggin' hate these people. Okay. The only thing I hate more than mornings are morning people, just to be clear. They're so damn chipper in the morning. I mean, you got me up at 7:45 this morning. I'm not exactly thrilled about it. Just
me.
To
I
be
wake
clear.
up and I'm up. I mean, it's something I've trained myself to do too, is get out of bed within 5 minutes, because otherwise I feel like
that's a very good. Well, that's a good technique to have, generally speaking. But what I'm talking about are all these different actual genetic predetermined situations with your hormones. So here's what we discovered, which was really interesting. Testosterone has a very predictable circadian rhythm. So does estrogen. So does melatonin. Actually, all hormones do. If you know when they spike initially, you can then plan your day around these spikes in hormones. So as an example, so the first one we started to look at was sex, right? Because everybody wants to know, what's the best time of day to have sex, Michael? Well, think about it from a hormonal perspective. You need 5 hormones to successfully have sex. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, adrenaline, and cortisol all need to be high, and melatonin needs to be low. Here's the interesting thing. We did a survey. 73% of people have sex between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. Not a particularly big surprise there. I'll give you one guess what their hormone profile looks like.
That's probably jacked up. Yeah, because the melatonin at that point in time is high. Yeah.
Exactly. Their melatonin is high and all those other things are low. So that's one hint as to, from a hormonal standpoint, when should you be having sex? The other one is, what do most men wake up with in the morning? An erection, right? Morning wood. Like, if that's not Mother Nature telling you when to use that thing, I don't know what is, right? think about
this
it.
is definitely going in the show notes because every guy needs to know this for sure.
Right. So it's interesting, right? And so you start to think about this and you say to yourself, okay, how else can I learn about this? Nutrition follows the same path. We see this in a very general sense. If anybody out there does intermittent fasting, right? That's, time restricted eating during a particular time of day. And guess what? Your metabolism works better for it. You can do the same with exercise. You can do it with sex. You can do it with email. You can do it with sales calls. You can do it with almost anything. Okay. People have different times of day where they are receptive to different activities. And if you know what they are based on their chronotype, you have a key to everybody that they don't know about. It's kind of awesome. So I'll give you an example. So I have a 17-year-old daughter. And my 17-year-old daughter really has no interest in spending very much time with her 53-year-old father. And when I go in the morning to wake her up, I say, "Good morning, Carson. What have you got on the plate for today?" Now, to be clear, she's 17 years old. She is a night owl. Almost all 17-year-olds are night owls. So mornings, it's like she's a vampire and the sun is just kicking in, right? And so she grunts at me and she's like, "Leave me alone, Dad." But if I walk into her room at 6 o'clock at night and ask the same question, I say, "Carson, what did you have on the plate today?" I'm in there for an hour and a half and I'm spending time with my daughter. And I can't think of anything more important than that. So it's a communication tool, right? It's understanding where people are in their world and then communicating with them. And here's the thing. People say to me all the time, "Well, there's 4 chronotypes, Michael. How do you know which one you are?" Well, I created a quiz. It's pretty simple. Go to chronoquiz.com, right? And check it out. And it takes about 2 minutes.
Like a at-home test or something for that gene, the PE3 gene. Yeah.
So here's the thing is we didn't want to do blood work. We didn't want to get into privacy. We didn't want to do all of that because that is a super duper private scenario. However, we have had over 2 million people take my quiz and when we've been able to narrow it down. So we're getting pretty good at it. Now, to be fair, there are 4 different chronotypes. I'm going to explain what they are to everybody. So the early bird, I changed. So you'll appreciate this. So we're sitting there in the marketing meeting for the book, right? And we're saying, what should we call these archetypes? And I'm like, I want to use animals. And so it's very interesting because some people don't want to be certain animals. It turns out that nobody wants to be a porcupine and nobody wants to be a platypus. So we had to choose
why the hell
animals. So we had to choose animals that people would resonate to. We also chose animals that actually have the schedule themselves, right? So lions are now early birds. Lions actually did their first kill is before dawn. They're very early morning creatures. They have a tendency to actually go to bed while it's still sunny outside, believe it or not. Bears represent people in the middle, right? Because bears are kind of like that. Bears go to bed around, when it gets dark and they wake up when it gets early. Wolves are the night owls. That's me. I'm a wolf. We all know wolves are very nocturnal creatures. And then dolphins make up my insomnia population. Now, people always say, "Well, why'd you choose dolphins?" So it turns out that dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators. So I felt like that was kind of an interesting representation of my patients who are never quite asleep. If you look at the percentages, it's pretty interesting. Early birds or lions make up about 10 to 15%. They're really my early morning optimists. They have a tendency to be COOs, by the way. They're good at logistics. They have a tendency also to make a list every day and go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, kind of militant in their thinking. But to be fair, people tell me all the time, like, "Oh, dude, I wish I was a lion. I want to get up early and be so productive during the day." To be fair, it's a genetic thing, right? You can't just force yourself to be a lion. Number one, it does not work. So like I talked to my friend Hal Elrod. So Hal wrote a book called The Miracle Morning. And it talks all about how he did this great survey looking at incredibly successful people. And they did 6 different things in the mornings to help them, become successful. And I turned to Hal and I said, "You got a real problem here." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Only 15% of people can actually do what you're talking about, like in a healthy way. Like their bodies naturally will wake up very, very early in the morning." And he said, "Well, I understand where you're coming from, Michael." And so what he did was he said, "It's the 6 things that you do whenever it's your morning. So if you're a night owl and you don't wake up until 8, that's when you do your 6 things. If you're an early bird like a lion and you wake up at 4:30, that's when you do your thing." So it's very interesting when we start to think about this idea of success is equated to early morning rising. That is just not the case. Most people, in fact, are bears. They make up about 50% of the population. They have a tendency to be more extroverted, also more social. They're the folks that get work done. It's actually the best to be a bear because most of society works on a bear schedule. And, these chronotypes aren't new, to be clear. If you go back to hunter-gatherer days, think about it like this. Who were the hunters? Well, they were the lions. They got up early and they went out and they got the food. Who were the bears? Well, they were the people that tended the village, watched the children, built the community. Who were the wolves? Well, they were security. I mean, they were up anyway, right? They were the sentries. They were sitting there with the spears, right? We didn't actually get dolphins until the Industrial Revolution occurred. And that asshole Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. He really screwed it up.
Then you had 3 shifts or 4 shifts in the factory, right? Yeah, exactly. You got it.
And that's exactly what happened is Industrial Revolution come, people can work at night, boom, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? And that's when we really started to see sleep becoming such a major problem for folks. When we get back to the chronotypes and we look at the bears, right? So they do a lot of good stuff. It's the best to be a bear because again, everybody works on the bear schedule. Next, we have the wolves, which is me. I make up about 15% of the population. Most of the wolves are the creatives. So it's the artists, the actors, the musicians, the authors, scientists, people like that. We're not particularly social. I personally happen to be a pretty social creature, but most of the people who are wolves are not. We show up at the party at 10:30. We stay till 2:00 in the morning. We have great conversations. We're super loyal friends. And we're good people, but we are definitely night people. We're not big thrilling going out in the daytime. And it definitely, sunshine is sometimes hard for us. The final category are the dolphins. They make up also about 15%, sometimes 10. And I wrote the entire book just for the dolphins. And so if folks are interested in the book, it's called The Power of When, and it specifically helps people in any one of these chronotypes. My dolphins are my insomniacs. They have very short sleep drive and they wish they had longer sleep drive. So they're like, oh, I'm craving more sleep, but in fact, they're never going to get it because their body genetically isn't going to allow them to. So with those people, what we do is we help them do things like figure out the best time to sleep. We figure out what accoutrements should be around. Should they have good beds, good pillows, good lighting, all of those things. So for those people, we really try to dial in because their environment turns out to be very, very affecting their sleep. And so when we start to look at sleep in general, I know I've been throwing a lot of information at you today.
I'm tracking with you. I mean, I'm still not letting you off the hook to going back to scotch and coffee and how to trick the receptor and caffeine. Awesome.
Yep. So once we understand this, the one of the questions you said, I'm there. Like, how do I get my 8 and 6.5? So step number 1 is know your chronotype. So I'll tell you what happened, what my experience was. And I was not expecting this. And this was not something that I knew was going to happen. Is about 3.5, 4 years ago, 5.5 years ago, right as I was finishing the book, I decided I was going to follow my chronotypical wake time and bedtime because I was writing a friggin' book about it, right? I should see what it's like and, test it out myself. And so I did. So I'm a night owl. So I said, I'm going to bed at midnight and I'm not going to use an alarm and I'm going to let my body wake me up when I do because I know I sleep late. So for the first 3 months, I was waking up at 7:30, pretty much on the head. Then all of a sudden it was like 7:15. Then 3 months later, it was 7:00. I'm still going to bed exactly at midnight, just to be clear. Okay. Within about a year, my body would not allow me to sleep more than 6 hours and 15 minutes. I go to bed at midnight. I naturally wake up at 6:13. I don't know why it's 6:13, but it's friggin' 6:13 every single morning. And that's when my body does it. So I've consolidated my sleep. To be clear, it's 8:23 here in Los Angeles. I've had 0 caffeine today. I've been up since 6:13 and this is my energy level. And I am a night owl. Okay, just to be clear. So it's interesting when you start to see this consolidation of sleep. So step number 1, know your chronotype and wake up. Notice I didn't say go to bed, wake up at your chronotypical wake up time. Many people want to go to bed at various times and watch Netflix or hang out with friends. I don't have a problem with that. I'm a pretty social person, so I get it. But if you can consolidate the wake up time and be consistent, including the weekends. Don't sleep in on the weekends. Do not do it. Your body really works very, very well on a consistency basis. And so when it knows to go to bed and it knows to wake up, all the other things that we've been talking about are much easier for them to kind of go. Step number 2 has to do with caffeine, right? So Most people don't know it, but caffeine has a half-life of 6 to 8 hours, and it will depend upon how quick of a metabolizer you are, right? And so if you're young, you may metabolize faster. If you're older, you may metabolize slower. And so it could stay in your system for a significant period of time. Now, 6 to 8 hours is a lot of time. So generally speaking, what I ask people to do is I say, if you can, limit caffeine by 2 o'clock. Why 2? Well, 8 hours later is 10 o'clock, which is roughly when people are going to bed. So that's kind of where I come up with that number. Now, people also oftentimes ask me the question like, well, how close to 2 o'clock, or can I be drinking my caffeine? Like, can I do it up until the last, moment, if you will? Well, you can, but remember, you're still going to have half of that amount of caffeine on board. So the average cup of coffee is 100 to 110 milligrams of caffeine. The National Sleep Foundation says about 250 milligrams of caffeine is kind of where you would want to be at your maximum. To be clear, caffeine has
at any point in time in your serum level, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Caffeine has zero nutritional value, zero. Okay. So there's really no reason to have caffeine in your system, but I do like Black Rifle coffee, and I like black coffee in general. And so I'm a coffee drinker. I drink 1 cup of coffee. And what I also do is I wait in the morning. Michael, you're killing me. You're telling me I have to stop at 2 o'clock. What are you talking about waiting in the morning? So here's the thing. In order to pull the brain out of a state of unconsciousness, you need 2 hormones. You need adrenaline and you need cortisol. And they both have to be pretty jacked up, right? Well, as we were talking about with sex before, you want those high. They're naturally high because you're waking up. So that's kind of the reason why you end up having that. Well, here's the problem. If you have a brain that's got adrenaline and cortisol binging around in it, when you add caffeine, it does almost nothing. If you compared adrenaline and cortisol to caffeine, it'd be like comparing cocaine to weak tea in terms of how powerful they are, right? So all you're doing is you're throwing side effects onto your brain. But if you wait 90 minutes after you wake up, those hormones naturally subside. Then when you drink caffeine, it actually lifts those hormones. You get a bigger bang for your buck just by waiting 90 minutes after you wake up for your first caffeinated beverage.
Dude, I'm doing this every day now. I mean, that's the easiest hack in the world.
I know, it's the best, right? And if you stop around 2, you're in great shape. So if let's make the math simple. If you get up at 6:30, you would have your first cup of coffee at 8, right? And you might have 1 around lunch. And then if you had another one, you'd have to stop it by 2. I recommend only 2 in a day because that keeps you to that 250 milligrams ish, depending upon what your sources of caffeine might be. So step number 2, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. if you possibly can. I promise you it will work out better for the quality of your sleep.
That's not just coffee. 3, you're talking teas, anything.
Yeah,
just
for sure. Anything that's anything that's caffeinated, soda, you would want to stop it at 2. For sure.
Diet soda. Nobody should drink diet soda anyways. God, that stuff is so full. To be clear,
nobody should drink soda.
Yeah,
period.
Right on.
Like it's sugar water. It's not doing you any good. It's empty calories. I'd much rather see you take some water and right now, remember something. Oh, actually, this is an important point. Sleep is a dehydrative event. Most people don't know that. Just from the humidity in your breath, you lose almost a full liter of water every single night. So when you wake up, dude, you shouldn't be drinking caffeine. Caffeine's a diuretic. It makes you pee, right? So you take an already dehydrated body and you stick caffeine in it. Dude, you're going to be a raisin before 9 o'clock, right? So what you need to do is hydrate, right? So hydrate. So I tell people when you wake up in the morning, you need to drink a minimum of 15 to 30 ounces of filtered water, room temperature. High five to that.
Yep.
Right? Bam. Right? That's what we want. Always, always, always. Not caffeine. We want water in the morning. I tell people this and they're
like, you're crazy. I'm like, I just discovered that just out of trial and error. That's it. But I noticed I was the best hydrated. As soon as I would get up, I would drink 32 ounces. It's always right by my bed. 30 because it's room temp because it's been sitting there all night and I just down it before I eat a single bite.
Exactly. Number 1, it slows down your eating. Number 2, it absolutely rehydrates you first. And remember, you want your body to rehydrate before it starts to digest. Okay. Hydration is higher on the scale of human living than food is, right? So water gets there first, and that's what we want. And remember, your body doesn't function well on a dehydrated body ever, no matter what you're doing, whether you're brushing your teeth or you're going for your morning run, you should absolutely positively hydrate. Okay, so let's talk about alcohol. So when we talk about alcohol, we're talking about the night before. Now, to be fair, I'm no teetotaler. I like scotch. So what can I do to enjoy a scotch in the evening and not completely mess up my sleep?
Single malt, I hope. I'm just saying.
Absolutely. And I'm less on the peaty side, and I'm more on the other side, more on the woody
Speyside
oaky
Highlands.
side.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there you go. So here's the thing is, so first of all, I have a little bit of bad news for you, Scotch and bourbon people out there. Is it turns out that brown liquor is a little bit more disruptive to sleep than clear liquor is. We think it has to do with the sugars and the tannins and things like that. So the white wines and the vodkas and the gins are going to be a little bit better than the big Cabernets or the bourbons or the Scotches.
You're killing me, dude.
I know. It's the rich, it's the richness. It's that flavor that we love.
That's what Ron Swanson said. Clear alcohol is. You ever watch Parks and Rec? The show at all? Yeah. It says clear liquids are for white rich women on a diet.
Right, exactly.
Or clear alcohol. Yeah.
So for us, we know that alcohol affects sleep across the boards, but unfortunately the darker stuff does it a little bit worse. On average, it takes the average human 1 hour to digest one alcoholic beverage. So what I generally speaking tell people is if you have one scotch, you wait 1 hour and you drink one glass of water. If you have two scotches, you drink 2 glasses of water and you wait 2 hours. You really don't want to go to the third drink, and I'll tell you why. Number one, once you kind of hit drink number 3, you're not just drinking for the taste, right? You're drinking for a purpose at that point. You're social, you're having fun, what have you. I totally get it. But at the end of that scenario, the most important thing is the time from the last sip to lights out. That time frame is going to have the greatest effect on your sleep from an alcohol perspective. And here's what it does. It obliterates stage 3, 4 sleep. It just basically knocks it out. So remember, that's the physical restoration. This is the reason why people pass out as opposed to going to sleep, and they basically have anesthetized themselves, right?
So you're generally thinking when you're drinking for the taste, you wait 2 hours from your last sip before you go to sleep.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. And that's how it works. Very easy. You can enjoy your alcohol without getting hammered and still have a good night's sleep. So step number 3, as a general rule, is wait 3 hours after your last drink. That gives you 2.5 drinks if you want to kind of get there, if you will. My fourth one is something that you've actually already mentioned today. You said you went on a run, and it's all about exercise, right? So I'm a huge fan of exercise. I'm a daily exerciser when I'm not injured. And I love it. The data is very, very consistent. We now know that people who exercise daily have higher quality sleep. It's just a fact. Okay. Remember, sleep is recovery. And so if you don't do anything to recover from, it's really hard to get a really good night's sleep. And that also brings up another point that I wanted to make about today is when you're talking about COVID, people are not moving. And that is a problem. I have some celebrity clients. I had one who tweeted out the other day that she said, I've taken 200 steps and it's 2:00. It's like, oh my God, by that time I've taken like 8,000 steps, and so it's like people aren't moving because we don't have to commute. People aren't getting out and about. It's a problem. Okay.
How do you feel about stand-up desks to help with that scenario? Does that help at all?
I love it. I think it does. There's no question. I think it does help. People need to also, though, if you're going to have a stand-up desk, look at your posture. That's one of the big things, because if you have terrible posture when you're standing at your desk, your back's going to start to hurt. But I also recommend a mat underneath you if you're going to be standing all day.
Fatigue mat. Yep. Yeah.
Just to be able to make sure that you don't continue to impact those discs and things like that. To be honest with you, dude, what I do is I have 5 short little breaks throughout the day to help keep me moving. So I do a stretch, I do a bounce, I do a shake, I do like a push-ups, and then I do something more like a yoga evening stretch at night. So I choose these different times throughout the day to do and it's just for 5 minutes. And it's especially when I get fatigued, or if I've been sitting for too long, or I've been Zooming for too long, I have a tendency to do that. But here's the thing that people need to understand about exercise is exercise in and of itself is awesome, but it does raise your core body temperature. Remember, sleep follows your core body temperature, and we want to get cooler in the evening, not warmer. So step number 4 is exercise daily, but if you can, don't exercise within 4 hours of bedtime, if possible. Now, I want to put a caveat in here. So when I was in graduate school getting my Ph.D., I was a runner and I was doing sleep subjects. And so I couldn't run until about 11 o'clock at night. I was TAing, I was doing things, and I lived in Athens, Georgia, which is a very safe place to run at night. And I would go out at 11 o'clock at night. I would do my 5K. I would come back, shower, have a very small bite, and fall right to sleep. And people are like, wait a second, your core body temperature was up. It turns out that there are some people who, from exercise, they get energy. And from some people, exercise kind of chills them out, right? I don't know which one everybody out there is.
Is that a genetic thing too?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I was never able to figure it out. But what I did discover is that some people, I did discover that people with depression have a tendency to get energy from exercise, and people with anxiety have a tendency to become more relaxed from exercise. I have a decent amount of anxiety myself, and so that's probably why I fell into that category. And I discovered that doing exercise in the evening was actually helpful for me, as long as I took not a cold, but a cool shower to help that process a little bit more. I'm not talking Wim Hof here, to be clear. Okay. You don't want to have an ice bath before bed. That's not going to go over well. But if you are unfortunately exercising in the evening, do yourself a favor and try to have a cooler shower to start bringing that temperature of your body down, because it'll be very, very helpful.
I love exercising in the morning specifically because I know about the core temp raise, and it helps me, I know it does, burn consistent fat or any other calories throughout the day because my temp's higher. And then this is a hack that I put in. I mean, this is not science backed. This is just what I've read over the years, with the temperature even in the room at night, because you're saying you want to be cooler at nights. And I know that you get deeper sleep or better in that stage 3 or 4 when it's a cooler temp in your room. So I bought it's a smart thermostat. It's a Honeywell, but it's one of the most expensive ones because it has 6 programmable times. Exactly. And I have it the coolest at night, especially in the winters in Chicago. But then I actually so in the summers in Chicago, I actually program it to even step down the AC to 69 or 68 degrees at night. But then I have it gradually raise from because I always want to get up between 5:30 and 6. I actually have it gradually raise by a degree or 2 through that 45 minutes. To almost like naturally bring the room even to help my core body temp back up and just wake up naturally.
Yeah. And so it will help. It takes time to do that. And so your body has to react. And also don't forget your undercovers, wearing clothing, things like that. So there's a lot of different factors. And this is an opportunity for us to talk about equipment, right? Like sleep equipment. So people always ask me all the time. So again, I'm a runner, right? And so I can run a race in flip-flops with cutoffs with a torn t-shirt and a boombox on my arm, but my time's not going to be too good, right? But if I've got my Asics on and my dry fit wear and I've got good tunes, like I can do a 7:45 mile, no problem, right? So if you've got the right equipment, you can do it. I would argue sleep is exactly the same way. If you've got the right equipment, you will sleep better. What does that mean? Looking at your mattress, at your pillows, at your sheets, looking at things like temperature, looking at things like lighting, like sound, even smell, aromatherapy, looking at all of these things. The people who qualify as dolphins in my quiz, right? This is the area that we really shine for them, because we can take extracurricular stuff that's outside in their environment and help them with their sleep. For example, I have a menopausal female who's a dolphin, and she is going through hot flashes, and it's very difficult for her to have any form of sleep. And so we were able to discover a device that actually helps cool her at night. And so we actually installed it into her bed, and now she's sleeping better because, again, lowering this core body temperature with a direct effect of cool. So it's pretty interesting when you start to look at some of the gizmos and gadgets that are out there.
No doubt. Yeah. I bought a Lisa bed, it's a memory foam bed just a little while back. And I was looking at, Stearns and Foster, $10,000 plus mattresses. And then I found the Lisa bed and just read all about the tech that goes into this thing. And it's incredible because it keeps me cooler at night, but yet I'm still warm enough even during the brutal winters that we can sometimes have in Chicago, but it keeps me cooler and almost conforms to my body temp. And I feel like it even helps my core temp even rise in the mornings. It's interesting how it works. But it was only something like an $800 mattress. And it also gives me the best freaking possible support.
So here's what's fascinating about mattresses is I've seen mattresses for $200 and I've seen mattresses for $400,000. Okay. And I've worked with people in every single bed in between. And there's a lot of different ways that you can look at mattresses and think about mattresses. Personally, on the innovation side of things, I like purple. Purple does a lot of really interesting things. And they have a completely different form factor. Like it's not foam, it's not springs. It's this whole unique scientific, innovative process that uses these honeycombs. It's really interesting. I like them on the innovation side of things. And then on the luxury side of things, this is going to sound crazy, but I have a Haston's. So Haston's makes $400,000 products. I do not have a $400,000 bed, just to
Why
be
not,
clear.
man? Come on.
Well, so when you look at it, so it's a great question, and people ask me this question all the time. And I work with Haston's, by the way, all the time, and they make an unbelievable product. The $400,000 product literally has over $120,000 worth of materials. So I've seen the bill, like I've actually seen the raw material bill. Like it's insane what they put in this thing. But to be fair, like Drake has one of those. You know, Beyonce has a couple of those. Like there are humans in the world that want that. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Believe it or not, Haston's is the oldest bed maker in the world, 170 years. They invented the bed frame and the box spring of all things. Yeah, I know, right? And they have products that are much changed in price. They've got a $15,000 product that you can finance and pay $150 for. So it's not like you can't get to that level of aspirational luxury, right? You know, for me, I always, for whatever reason, I always felt like the car that you drove said something about you. I grew up in Atlanta, so there was a lot of cars, and a lot of people wandering around in cars. You know, now is it your bed? Well, maybe. Depends on really where you want to put your money and really where you think it's important for you. Do I have people who get as good a night's sleep in a $2,000 mattress as they would in a $20,000 mattress? Yes. Absolutely, positively do. But there are people who drive Priuses and there are people who drive BMWs, and there's a whole world of choice out there for people. So one of the things I always caution people about is I say, don't look at the price at first. I get it. Everybody's got a budget. Think about what you need the product to do for you. So as an example, if you have low back pain, you really want to focus on a product that does something for low back pain. If temperature is your gig, right, you want to focus on something that's very temperature sensitive. Unfortunately, memory foam has a tendency to not be as it has a tendency to trap heat in many cases, not help people with heat. So when looking at this, and I can go way down the rabbit hole on mattresses for people, but at the end of the day, here's what I'll tell you is don't look at the price tag as much as look at your body. What is your body asking you for? If you're waking up in pain, get a new bed. Okay. Real quick caution, look where your pain is. If you have lower back pain, that's probably a mattress issue. If you have upper shoulder or neck pain, that's actually probably a pillow issue.
Pillow. Yeah, right on.
Mm-hmm. And I tell people all the time, before you go out and spend money on a new bed, buy a new pillow first. And let's see, because remember, pillow is kind of a bed for your head, right? And so you want to think about that based on your body position, if you've got any pain, squish factor, if you will. I wrote an entire blog on how to pick the perfect pillow. We can put it into the show notes if you want, that people can get a hold of. I also did the same thing for mattresses, kind of giving people just a guideline of how do you choose a bed? What are the different styles of bed? I actually do mattress reviews on my website if people are interested in the bed in the box category, because we do a lot of stuff looking at those. And it's been very interesting to see what people are spending money on. Lighting is a big area, because the amount of light that's in your bedroom in the evening has a direct effect on your quality of your sleep. And so I'm telling people all the time, buy an eye mask, use blackout curtains. The darker, the better if you can. Now, full disclosure, my wife falls asleep with the television on every single night. Okay. And it's going most of the night in our house. What? You're the sleep doctor, Michael. How can you possibly do that? So let me explain to you the situation. My wife and I have been married for 22 years.
There's a disclaimer now, right? Yep.
And so when we first got married, I was studying to be a sleep doctor. And I said, we got to get the TV out of the room. And she said, you can get your butt out of the room before the TV is going out of the room. And so I moved the TV out. She promptly kicked me out of the bedroom. I was allowed back in when I put the TV back in. So I studied her and I decided I've got to figure out what's going on. Maybe there's a way I can work with this. And so it turns out that she's not watching it. She's listening to it out of what I call the corner of her ear. So it's usually an old episode of Seinfeld, but it's just something to help the monkey mind. She says that she can't turn off her brain at night. And this is an easy way to listen to something that is not something that she needs to know. And it just drifts her off and gets her there. I'm the only sleep doctor in the universe that says it's A-OK to sleep with the TV on. Look, dude, 99% of televisions have timers built into the software. Go to the timer, set it for 3 or 4 hours. It turns off automatically and everybody is happy. Okay. I've been able to easily fall asleep with the TV on. And most people can. Now, if it is so disruptive for you that your bed partner has that, well, guess what? You either need to get them pillow speakers. Pillow speakers, Michael, what the hell are those? These are actually go to Google, type in pillow speakers. You'd be shocked. There are Bluetooth speakers that will attach to your TV where only you hear the TV. So your bed partner can put on an eye mask and go to sleep and not hear a thing. There are lots and lots and lots of solutions out there. One of my favorite solutions right now are called Sleep Buds, B-U-D-S. They're made by Bose and they're earphones that you sleep with all night long. And they have a special library of music that actually is sleep inducing. So, you can't plug in, your AC/DC at night, but you can listen to music that is calming and soothing and help you sleep. So there's some pretty cool stuff out there as far as gizmos and gadgets that can be helpful.
That's awesome, my man. I picked up, we're going to close out here, but I picked up really a couple different things that you said throughout the course that were just amazing. One, make sure that you wake up at the same time every morning. Just to program that in. Yep. 2, wait 90 minutes before you have any kind of caffeine whatsoever, right? Because of your cortisol levels and your adrenaline levels.
Exactly.
And third, make sure that you stop most nights, unless you're being social in moderation, right?
Right.
But most nights, because I love to have a scotch with dinner, maybe 2 or 3 nights a week, but stop at 2 drinks and stop 2 hours before you go to sleep.
Exactly.
Big ones. Michael, this has been amazing, my man. I mean, those are just crazy cool hacks that I'm going to start doing tomorrow.
Well, with that, so first of all, of course, thanks for having me on the show. I've got one more hack for all of your listeners that you guys will love it. And I do this for all of my entrepreneurs and they love it. So I call it the Napa Latte. All right. So this is a caffeine nap. So remember how I was talking about the molecular structure of adenosine and the molecular structure of caffeine? They're only off by one molecule. So here's what you do is you take a cup of drip black coffee, throw in 3 ice cubes merely to cool it down. Drink the whole thing as quickly as you can and then immediately close your eyes. When you fall asleep, you'll burn through the adenosine that's sitting there that's accumulated, making you sleepy. The caffeine is waiting in the wings. It fits into that receptor. You're good for 4 hours, guaranteed. Doesn't matter how much sleep you had.
That's incredible. So 1 cup of black coffee. And when we're talking cups, you're really talking 6 ounces. Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, the Starbucks culture, right? A cup is a freaking venti 24-ounce whatever piece of garbage that has 600 milligrams of caffeine. Yeah.
Right. 6 to 8 ounces of coffee right before you go to sleep. Get some Z's and then wake up 25 minutes later. It's got to be at 25 minutes. If you go longer than 25 minutes, you'll feel like crap. And that's about when the caffeine kicks in. Don't worry if you don't actually fall asleep, but you're just mellow and chilling out. It works almost as well.
That's incredible, man. Michael Breus, Dr. Michael Breus, thesleepdoctor.com. Thank you, brother, for being on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I had a lot of fun. Good luck for you and all of your entrepreneurs.
Thanks, bud. What's shaking? Thank you for joining me on the All In Podcast. Click the subscribe button and smash that bell for notifications. Text me, 312-535-8520. Follow me on social media at Mr. Rick Jordan. See you next episode. I am Rick Jordan, and I approve this message.